I made a mistake once. I trusted my own son. Let me be clear about something before I tell you this story. I am not a perfect man. I have never claimed to be. I worked with my hands for 31 years as a structural engineer, got up before dawn most of my life, missed a handful of birthdays and 2 school plays because deadlines don't care about your family calendar. My wife Carol used to say I loved that drafting table more than I loved her. She was teasing mostly. I hope she was teasing. Carol passed 6 years ago, pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the day I sat alone in the house we had shared for 28 years and realized I had no idea what to do with the rest of my life. My son Derek flew in from Austin for the funeral. He stayed 4 days. He hugged me at the airport before his flight back and told me to call if I needed anything. I nodded. I did not call. I kept myself busy the only way I knew how. I built things. After I retired from the firm, I had converted our 3-car garage into a proper woodworking shop. Custom furniture, cabinetry, finish carpentry. I started selling pieces at a local market on weekends, and word spread faster than I expected. Within 8 months, I had more orders than I could handle alone. I leased a small warehouse on the east side of Raleigh, hired 2 craftsmen, and registered the business officially. I called it Caldwell & Sons Woodworks, even though at the time it was just me. I suppose I was being optimistic. Or sentimental. Probably both. Derek called me one Sunday evening about 2 years after Carol died. He told me things in Austin weren't working out the way he had planned. His tech sales job had been restructured, which I later understood to mean he had been let go. He asked if there was room for him at the shop. He had worked summers with me during high school, knew his way around a table saw, had a good eye for joinery. I told him yes without hesitating. I told him I would put him on salary immediately, nothing fancy, but fair. He said that meant a lot. I slept better that night than I had in months. Having Derek around was good for me in ways I did not expect. He had energy I had forgotten about. He set up a proper website, started photographing the pieces before delivery, got us on social media. Orders increased by 40% in the first year. I gave him a raise and his own title on the business cards. General Manager. He seemed proud of that. I was proud of him. He met Vanessa about 8 months after he moved to Raleigh. She worked in marketing for a commercial real estate firm downtown. She was sharp, well-dressed, confident in a way that filled a room. The first time Derek brought her to the shop, she walked the floor with her hands clasped behind her back like she was appraising the place. She commented that the lighting was poor and the workflow seemed inefficient. She said it pleasantly enough with a smile, but I noticed she did not ask a single question about the work itself, about the craft. She never once touched a piece of wood. They got engaged 11 months later. I took them both to dinner at a nice steakhouse and gave Derek his grandfather's watch, the one I had been saving. Vanessa looked at it briefly, said it was classic, and then spent most of the dinner talking about the wedding venue she had already put a deposit on. I paid the bill. I congratulated them both and drove home and sat in the shop for a while in the dark, not building anything, just sitting. The wedding was beautiful. I will say that honestly. Vanessa had taste, whatever else I came to think of her later. I walked my son down the aisle because we had no officiant for that part of the ceremony, and when I shook his hand at the altar, he gripped it hard and looked at me with something I can only describe as relief. Like I had just pulled him out of a current he had not noticed he was caught in. I did not understand that look until much later. The changes at Caldwell & Sons started small. Vanessa began coming by the shop a few afternoons a week, eventually most days. She said she wanted to understand the business better. I thought that was reasonable. A husband and wife building something together, I had no objection to that. I showed her the books, walked her through our supplier relationships, introduced her to our 2 main commercial clients. 3 months after the wedding, Derek came to me with a proposal. Vanessa had drafted it. I could tell by the font and the formatting. It suggested adding her as a co-owner of the business, a 30% stake, with a defined role as Director of Business Development. The document was 4 pages long and included projected revenue scenarios and a proposed salary for her position. I read it twice. I told Derek I wanted to think about it for a few days. He nodded, but his jaw was tight. He said Vanessa had put a lot of work into that proposal. I said I could see that. I said I still needed a few days. I called my attorney, a woman named Patricia, who had handled my estate planning since Carol died. I asked her to review the document. She called me back the next morning and told me to be very careful. She pointed out 3 clauses buried in the language that, if I signed, would give Vanessa effective operational authority over decisions I currently made unilaterally, including personnel, including client contracts, including any future sale of the business. I thanked Patricia. I did not sign the proposal. Derek was quiet with me for about 2 weeks after that. Vanessa remained pleasant in the shop, almost pointedly pleasant, the kind of warm that has no warmth in it. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself family businesses had friction, and that was normal. I focused on a large contract we had landed with a hotel renovation project downtown, the biggest single job we had ever taken on. The hotel project required longer hours from everyone. Derek threw himself into it, managing the installation crew, staying late most nights. I was grateful for his commitment. What I did not notice, because I was buried in the production side, was that during those 3 months, Vanessa had been quietly introducing herself to our 2 commercial clients as Derek's business partner. Not his wife, his business partner. One of them, a property developer named Harris who had been sending us work for 4 years, called me one afternoon to confirm a detail about an upcoming project and mentioned casually that Vanessa had been his primary contact lately. He assumed I knew. I said yes, of course. I hung up and stood very still for a moment. That evening I had a direct conversation with Derek. I told him I needed Vanessa to communicate through me or him on client matters, not independently. I kept my voice level. I was not angry. I was clear. Derek looked uncomfortable and said she was only trying to help. I said I understood that, and I still needed it done my way. He said okay. He left the shop without saying goodnight. 2 days later, I came in at 6 in the morning as usual, and my key code for the back office did not work. I assumed a system glitch. I went around to the front, and the main lock still worked. I got inside and found Derek already at his desk. He looked up and said he had changed the office codes for security reasons, that the old code had been too simple. He gave me the new one. I wrote it down. I did not say what I was thinking. That same week, I noticed 2 vendor accounts had been moved into Derek's name only. I found this during a routine review of our accounts receivable. When I asked Derek about it, he said he had been consolidating things for efficiency, that he was handling most of the vendor communication anyway. I asked him to move them back or add me as a joint account holder. He said he would. He did not. I want to be honest with you. Part of me kept making excuses for him. He was my son. I had changed his diapers, coached his little league team, sat outside his hospital room when he had his appendix out at age 14, and been more frightened than I had ever been in my life. You do not stop loving someone because they are disappointing you. You keep hoping you are misreading the situation. The conversation that ended that hope happened on a Thursday evening in October. Derek came to me at the end of the day and asked if we could sit down. We went to the small conference table in the back office. He put a folder in front of me and folded his hands on top of it, in a way that reminded me, uncomfortably, of someone who had rehearsed this moment. He said that Vanessa and he had been doing a lot of thinking about the direction of the business. He said they felt the company had reached a point where it needed younger leadership to scale properly. He said that I had built something incredible, and now it was time for me to rest and enjoy what I had created. I asked him what he meant specifically. He opened the folder. Inside was a retirement agreement. It proposed that I transfer my ownership stake in the business to Derek and Vanessa jointly, step back from all operational roles, and accept a monthly payment from the business for 5 years, a kind of buyout structured as a consulting retainer. The monthly amount was modest, politely modest, the kind of number that communicates what someone thinks you are worth. There was a second document behind it, a deed transfer request for the warehouse building, which I owned personally and leased to the business. The document asked me to deed the property to the business entity, meaning to Derek and Vanessa, in exchange for a nominal payment of $1. $1. I looked at my son across that table. He was looking at the folder, not at me. I noticed he had a small cut on his left hand, probably from a rough edge on a cabinet he had been installing. I had taught him to always sand the edges before mounting. Some things you have to learn more than once. I told him I would review the documents and get back to him. He looked up then. He said he and Vanessa were hoping for an answer by the end of the month. He said it in the tone of someone who had already decided the answer. I drove home slowly. I fed the dog, a 12-year-old beagle named Howard, who had been Carol's before he became mine. I sat on the back porch and watched Howard sniff around the yard, and I thought about what Carol would say if she were sitting next to me. She would say, "That woman has been working on him like a river works on limestone, patient and constant and invisible until the damage is done." Carol was not a woman who minced words, even in my imagination. I called Patricia the next morning. I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Martin, I need you to listen to me very carefully." She asked me several questions. Had I ever formally changed the ownership split from what we had filed originally? No. What was the original split? I had registered the business with 51% in my name and 49% in Derek's. She asked if Derek knew that. I said I wasn't certain he had ever read the original filing carefully. She told me not to sign anything and to come into her office on Monday. That weekend I drove to the shop on Saturday, which I rarely did anymore since Derek had taken over the weekend scheduling. I let myself in with my key to the front door and went through the files. I found things I had not known were there. 3 quotes sent to clients under a slightly different business name, Caldwell Premier Works, with Derek listed as sole owner. An application for a line of credit submitted to a bank, listing the warehouse property as collateral, signed by Derek, using a property he did not own. A printed email thread between Derek and a commercial broker, discussing the potential sale of Caldwell & Sons as a going concern, with asking price estimates attached. They were not planning to take over the business and run it. They were planning to sell it. The warehouse and everything in it, the client list, the reputation built over years, the name I had chosen because I was being optimistic and sentimental. All of it. And I was supposed to hand it over for a modest monthly retainer and $1. I took photographs of everything with my phone. I locked up and drove to Patricia's office that same afternoon and left the images with her answering service. She called me Sunday morning. She said we had work to do. Monday I met with Patricia for 2 hours. I want to tell you something about having a good attorney in a moment like that. It is not that they make you feel powerful. It is that they make you feel clear. The fog of hurt and disbelief that had been sitting over me for months lifted a little in that office. Patricia walked me through exactly what we were going to do and exactly why each step was legally sound. By the time I left, I had a plan. I said nothing to Derek or Vanessa that week. I came to the shop as usual. I worked. I spoke to clients. I was polite. Vanessa brought coffee one morning, and I thanked her, and she smiled her warm smile with no warmth in it, and I smiled back. I was good at it by then. Patricia filed a notice of dissolution for the business partnership on a Wednesday afternoon. She also filed an injunction to prevent any transfer or encumbrance of the warehouse property pending resolution of the ownership dispute. She sent formal notification to the bank where Derek had applied for the line of credit, informing them that the property submitted as collateral was not Derek's to encumber. She sent a letter to Derek's personal attorney, notifying them of the 51% ownership stake and the legal implications of the actions already taken. Derek called me at 7 that evening. He did not say hello. He said Patricia had no right to interfere in his business. I said calmly that it was also my business, that I held controlling interest, and that I had every right to act accordingly. He said he had been running that company for 3 years, and I had stepped back and let him do it. I said that was true and I had appreciated his work, and that none of it transferred ownership. He said this was not what he expected from me. I said I could return the sentiment exactly. Then he said something that I still think about. He said, "Dad, you were supposed to retire. You were supposed to let us have this. Supposed to." As if it had been agreed upon somewhere, in some conversation I had missed, or in some version of our relationship that existed only in his and Vanessa's planning. As if my life's work was an inheritance they had been promised, and I was simply overdue in handing it over. I told him I loved him. I told him that had not changed and would not change. I told him that loving someone and allowing them to take everything you built were 2 entirely different things. I told him to have his attorney call Patricia. Then I hung up. The dissolution process took 47 days. Patricia was thorough. Because I held 51%, I had the authority to dissolve the partnership under the terms of the original filing. Derek contested it, of course. Vanessa's family hired an attorney who sent several strongly worded letters. Patricia replied to each of them with documents. The bank denied Derek's credit application once they understood the property situation. The broker Derek had been working with quietly stepped away. During those 47 days, Derek did not speak to me personally. Vanessa sent me a text message at one point that was 3 paragraphs long and mostly concerned with how much she had given up to help build the business and how little I had acknowledged it. I read it twice and then I put my phone down and went back to the workshop, where I was finishing a commission for a dining table in white oak, 8 chairs, delivery before Thanksgiving. I planed the tabletop by hand that afternoon, the long, slow strokes that require patience and attention and tell you everything about the wood you are working with. I found it settling. On the 48th day, Caldwell and Sons Woodworks was legally dissolved. On the 49th day, I registered a new business, Caldwell Craftworks, sole proprietor. I sent letters to every client we had ever worked with, every supplier, every contact in the industry. I explained that I was continuing operations under a new name with a renewed focus on custom residential work. I kept both craftsmen who had asked to stay on with me. I kept the warehouse. I kept the white oak table commission, which delivered on time, and the clients sent a photograph of their family sitting around it at Thanksgiving and wrote that it was the most beautiful piece of furniture they had ever owned. Derek called me in December. Not Vanessa's number. His personal cell, the one I had called when he was a teenager and needed a ride. His voice was different from the October call. Quieter. He said he was sorry. He said he didn't know how things had gotten so far in a direction that wasn't right. He said some other things that I will keep between us, because some conversations belong only to the people in them. I told him I was glad he called. I told him the door was not closed. It was just not open the way it used to be, and that was going to take time on both sides. He said he understood. I asked him what he was doing for work. He said he was figuring it out. I said that was honest. We talked for 22 minutes. It was the longest real conversation we had in 2 years. I am 63 years old. I get up at 5:30 most mornings. I make coffee, let Howard out, read for half an hour before the light changes, and the shop starts calling to me. I have 8 active commissions right now. More than I need, honestly. But I find I do not want to turn work away. Not because of the money, because of the feeling when a piece is finished and right. Because of the moment a client runs their hand across a surface you have spent 2 weeks getting exactly true and they go quiet for a second before they say anything. Carol would have liked this version of the business better than the old one, I think. Smaller, more deliberate, just the craft and the people who care about it. I am not telling you this story so you will feel sorry for me. I am not looking for that. I am telling it because I think some of you know exactly what it feels like to build something out of nothing, with your hands and your time and the best years of your body, and then to watch the people you built it for look at it like it was always theirs. To feel yourself becoming, as someone once put it to me perfectly, just a resource. You are not just a resource. What you built is yours. Loving your children does not mean surrendering the evidence of your life to them before you are finished living it. Being old enough to retire does not mean being old enough to disappear. I learned that at 63, which is later than I would have liked and earlier than it might have been. I am grateful for the timing either way. Howard is asleep under my drafting table as I write this. The white oak grain on my current project is extraordinary, tight and clear, with a faint, silver figure in the right light. I have been thinking about a light oil finish to let it speak for itself rather than covering it with something heavy. Sometimes the best thing you can do for something you have built is to stop adding to it and simply let it be what it is. I am still learning that lesson. I suspect I will be learning it for a while.